John and Reve got the phone call, the one that they'd been dreading. The severed head was that of their missing son, Adam Walsh. A smiling little boy in a baseball cap with a t-ball bat and missing baby teeth. It's hard not to look at Adam's face and picture the man he would have grown to be, only to be crushed to dust. Killing a child is the most unthinkable thing, and it's honestly hard for me to even cover cases where the victims are children. But here's the thing about Adam Walsh. In 2008, the Hollywood Police Department in Hollywood, Florida, closed the case and named the suspect that they believed responsible. But the person was never fully charged due to lack of evidence and a later recanted confession. Has the Adam Walsh case actually been solved? And so to dive into the Adam Walsh case, we really do have to go back to the day of the abduction. That morning, Reve had a full day of errands ahead of her. Her husband, John, left for work at 8:30, and then at around 9:30 a.m., she'd bring little Adam along with her to Sears. They'd been to the store at least 50 times, maybe dozens more, and sometimes she'd let him play in the toy department while she shopped nearby. But the Sears toy department seemed relatively contained. So that day, Adam begged his mother as they approached the kiosk to play. "Okay," she said, "I'll be in the lamp department. Stay right here and don't go anywhere, okay?" And Adam knew. He's like, "Okay, Mom, I won't leave." So as she'd done in the recent past, Reve left Adam behind in the toy department, with the thought never crossing her mind that this would be the last time she would ever see her son. But when Reve returned to the toy department, to the video game kiosk to grab Adam, it was deserted. No one was there. All the children who'd been there just 10 minutes earlier were gone, including Adam. Now, this was disorienting to Reve, and as we've said, Adam was obedient, even timid. It was totally unlike him to wander off. So she decided to walk up and down the aisles of the toy department, but every corner she turned yielded either strangers or empty space. Adam was nowhere to be seen. Adam had been missing for nearly 90 minutes. And that's when Reve picked up the phone and called the Hollywood Police Department. By now, it was 3:30 p.m. when the Hollywood police finally arrived. It took over an hour and a half, despite the Hollywood Police Department being directly adjacent to the mall, like right across the street. By early that evening, the Hollywood police had a search team scouring the city with 22 off-duty cops, about 6 civilian volunteers, and crime watchers with CB radios. It had become clear to everyone close to the situation that Adam likely had been abducted. There was no other logical explanation. The kid just vanished. Up in Indian River County, which is about 130 miles away and 2 hours to the north of Hollywood, fishing buddies Robert Hughes and Vernon Bailey took their boat out to go fishing in a canal. And as they were getting their gear ready, one of them noticed something floating in the water. Something that looked like a doll's head. They got into their boat and rowed over to inspect it. That's when they realized this item in the water was no doll's head. It was a human head, the head of a young boy. They immediately called the Indian River County Sheriff's Office. By this time, the whole state of Florida, and honestly, the whole country, was aware of Adam Walsh's disappearance. So Indian River got in touch with the Hollywood police. The following morning, John and Reve Walsh were in the ABC studios about to appear on Good Morning America when they received word that remains of a young boy had been found in a canal in Vero Beach. Afterward, John and Reve got the phone call, the one that they'd been dreading. The severed head was that of their missing son, Adam Walsh, and dental records would soon confirm it. It was the most devastating outcome they could have imagined, one they just couldn't bring themselves to prepare for. Now, once Adam's head was recovered, it was taken to the Indian River County Medical Examiner's office, where forensic examination led to a few conclusions. For one, Adam was dead before he was decapitated and had likely been killed by asphyxiation or strangulation. His head was severed with 4 or 5 blows from a sharp instrument, like maybe a meat cleaver, and the pathologist believed the head had been in the water for anywhere between 6 and 12 days. Now, some fractures in the mandible and nose area also suggested the possibility that Adam had been punched before death, but this remains unclear. Divers, meanwhile, searched the canal for additional remains, but were unable to find any, and the underwater search was cut short by the high number of alligators that were in the area at the time. Remember, this is Florida. This is gator country, and the canals are full of them. But the search, just like the underwater search, uncovered nothing. Around this time, press conferences were being held by the Hollywood police and other agencies. They expressed their fears that Adam's killer was a psychopath who might very well kill again. But now, we're going to return back to the days after Adam's head was found. And this all began with the arrests of two men, Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole. Now, Henry and Otis were what you might call scummy buddies. They were both drifters who had become best buds. So Henry Lee Lucas soon became known as a serial confessor. Otis Toole was also arrested around the same time as his scummy buddy, arrested for setting a house on fire that was resulted in the death of its occupant. And when Otis Toole was sent to jail for arson and murder, he followed his scummy buddy's lead and began doing the same thing. He began by admitting to setting nearly 4 dozen house fires across 2 decades. And when Toole was given a map of the state of Florida, he marked all of the areas where he claimed he had committed murders. In all, there were over 100 murders across the state of Florida that Toole had claimed responsibility for. So, is it just coincidence then that Otis Toole happened to first confess to killing Adam Walsh on October 11th, 1983. He said that in July of 81, he and Henry Lee Lucas had traveled to Fort Lauderdale in a white 1973 Cadillac he'd purchased a year earlier from Faye McNett. The car, he said, had Pennsylvania tags at the time. Toole went on to tell detectives that he and Henry Lee Lucas snatched the kid from a single-story mall outside of a Sears. Toole described the boy he and Henry allegedly kidnapped as being 7 to 10 years old, having blonde curly hair and wearing dungarees, a blue shirt, and sneakers. 6-year-old Adam had straight brown hair, and when he disappeared, he had been wearing a short-sleeved red and white striped Izod pullover shirt, green shorts, and flip-flops. So the description doesn't match at all. So there were only 2 possibilities. Either Toole was remembering Adam Walsh incorrectly, or he was making the whole thing up after watching the documentary. Otis went on to tell detectives that the little boy had run out of the Sears store and into their car, at which point Henry grabbed the little boy. They then rolled up the windows of the Cadillac and drove away from the mall with Otis in the driver's seat. Otis claimed he was drunk throughout the abduction, but remembered that he got onto the turnpike heading northbound until Henry couldn't control the kid anymore and had Otis turn off down a dirt road, where Henry then pulled out a machete, announced that he was, quote, demon of the devil, and beheaded the child with 4 blows while the boy was lying face down in the dirt. Very soon after Otis shared this account with police, it was confirmed that Henry Lee Lucas had been in jail up in Maryland at the time of Adam Walsh's murder. So Otis Toole's story was, at least in part, a total fabrication. But for investigators, the priority now became tracking down Otis Toole's white Cadillac, the one that he claimed he'd used to kidnap Adam. And when they finally located that Cadillac, they impounded it and began to process it for forensic evidence. They sprayed luminol in the front seat, back seat, and inside the trunk, and multiple areas began to fluoresce. In the back seat and in the trunk, areas that indicated the presence of blood. They also recovered a machete from inside the vehicle, and a sheath, and luminol applied to the sheath revealed traces of blood. But since it was 1983, DNA testing wasn't yet being done. So the state crime lab was limited in what they could do with these stains and this evidence. The best they could determine forensically at the time was the machete could have been the weapon used to decapitate Adam Walsh. After it was processed, the Cadillac was returned by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to the Jacksonville police. In 1994, when cold case detective Mark Smith with the Hollywood Police was assigned to the Walsh case, he began looking for the Cadillac. Because now DNA profiling was a tool that could be used in this case. And pulling up the carpet from inside the vehicle would yield a DNA profile. And they could determine once and for all if what Otis Toole had said was true. If Toole was Adam Walsh's killer. So Detective Smith called up to the Jacksonville Police Department and they told him they no longer had the Cadillac. So then Detective Smith tracked down the last owner of the vehicle, a guy who had been working as a cook at Pizza Hut in the mid-'80s and really wanted a Cadillac. So he bought the car from a used car dealership, but he had to wait for it to become available because the dealership told him the car had been owned by Henry Lee Lucas and was, quote, under investigation, which didn't deter him because a few weeks later, the car was ready. So he dropped by the dealership to pick it up. But almost immediately, the windows stopped working and he began having trouble with the engine. And after sinking more money into repairs than what he'd even paid to buy it, he decided to get rid of it and sold it for just $50 for scrap to a junkyard, where it almost certainly was destroyed and has not been seen since. So the only testable evidence that remained at this point was the machete recovered from the vehicle, its sheath, and some debris lifted from the machete. These items were sent to a North Carolina lab called Genetic Design, which only tested the machete. And this lab was unable to find any testable DNA on it. Back in 1985, both Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole were on death row at the time, but would later have their sentences commuted. In fact, Lucas's death sentence was commuted to life by then Governor of Texas, George W. Bush. 12 years later, in December 2008, the Hollywood Police Department held a press conference with both John and Reve Walsh participating, announcing that they were officially closing the Adam Walsh case, declaring it solved, naming Otis Toole as Adam's killer. It was stunning. So this is all quite strange, as is the crime itself. A 6-year-old boy taken from a crowded mall from a department store in broad daylight, and no one saw anything that ever led to a suspect. The more you examine the Adam Walsh case, the stranger and more improbable a crime it seems. But we can't fault the Walsh family for accepting Otis Toole as Adam's killer. He was a bad man, after all. Many in the true crime community do accept it as solved. But like so many cases, do we really ever know?